Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the Ford School and to the event hosted by Close Up today. My name is Brian Jacob. I'm the director of Close Up, the Center for Local, State, and Urban Policy. This is our inaugural, event for this academic year. For those of you who aren't familiar with Close Up, we host a series of these type of panel discussions and events. This year we have events coming up on prison reform in Michigan, healthcare in Michigan and the U.S. We have a few education-related events, including a conference to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Cherry Commission in Michigan. That will be in December. And so welcome. I'm glad we have such great turnout. I'd like to thank just a few people who have worked tirelessly to put this together. Bonnie Roberts and Tom Avacco and Beth Rybar from Close Up. And I'd like to thank Larissa Larsen, who is a professor in urban planning, who has graciously agreed to moderate the event. And to thank Olga Stella, who has played a large role in helping bring together all the different panelists and craft the content of the event here. So I hope you enjoy this. And with that, awesome.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on this Wednesday. For students, this is after break, and so I know that you're not sure if you should be here or really catching up on all those assignments you said you were going to do on those 2 days, but thanks for coming. Hopefully you're going to learn something worthwhile. So, as Brian nicely said, I'm Larissa Larsen. I'm an assistant professor in urban planning, and I recently have become engaged in this issue of food in Detroit because it is necessary. It is a positive sign of change, I think, within this environment. The statistics, many of you in this room know them. The current economic crisis has hit Detroit particularly hard. We're thinking about how do we transition this city, this auto-dependent place. It's deindustrializing. It has half the population that the city infrastructure was built from. As a result of the decline in the most recent economic decline, over 174,000 households in Wayne County depend on bridge cards, which are food subsidy cards, to feed themselves. As many of you have been to Detroit, you'll notice that food opportunities, there are opportunities, but they are often what we call fringe foods. They are often things high calorie, low nutrition. They are often expensive foods. They're often available at liquor and convenience stores. Randall told me the statistic that 60% of bridge cards, so that's the food subsidy cards, are used at convenience garage stores. And so the quality of food that most people are getting is just not very good. A recent study said that approximately 50% of people within the city are not within reasonable walking distance of a grocery store that offers affordable, healthy food. We have 4 people today here that are that are making some changes. Actually, before I go on to introduce our panelists, I have an obligation to the Sustainable Agriculture Working Group to make sure that you get a piece of paper that says their upcoming events. I think this is an expression of the interest on campus of this topic. It's running across sort of many areas, and I think today is another sign that we need to think and take action. We have 4 speakers today. Each speaker is going to talk for approximately 10 minutes about the program, the policies that they're engaged with in the city, and how they hope that this is contributing to revitalization and economic development in the city of Detroit. And then following that, we'll open it up for questions, because I think sometimes that's where the most fruitful discussion will come, when you have some things to ask these people that are really becoming specialists about doing this in a challenging setting. Just to introduce you to all the panelists, we have Olga Stella, which Brian already introduced. She is the Vice President of Business Development at the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation. She's also an alumni of this school, but before it had such a beautiful building. But we're pleased she is here today. We have Margaret Gary. She is the Director of Special Projects at the Michigan Department of Human Services. We have Brad Wilson next to her. Brad has a long title. It's Community Development Director of the United Food and Commercial Workers Statewide Community Development Organization, and he'll tell you more about what that actually is and what he does. And then in the last, we have Randall Fogelman, again, another alumni of actually the Urban Planning Program this time. He is Vice President of Business Development for Eastern Market Corporation, and he's going to be talking about 2 different programs that they have going there. So, Olga. Oops.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back at the school, and hopefully you all find this, as we're really excited to see all the interest in the topic, so hopefully you'll find our presentations today interesting, and the discussion that follows enlightening in terms of your own interest in this subject. So, what I was hoping to do with my portion of the presentation is to kind of set the stage for some of the other presentations today, and because there's a number of different things happening related to food access in Detroit. I mean, we could do a whole panel just on urban agriculture, or we could do a whole panel on a lot of things that are happening around food education and nutrition and all those kinds of things. And so this slice is really about the retail portion and how people are actually getting food into their homes. And the program that we're working on at DGC is specifically focused on grocery stores. The Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, where I work, is the city's economic development agency. Not only do we do physical revitalization projects to help create physical places for business and economic opportunity within the city, we also work to attract businesses and help retain the businesses that are located in Detroit. And this grocery initiative is kind of the keystone of our retail attraction strategy. And so I think it's important to understand, so, why are we focusing on grocery stores versus other kinds of food outlets? And, it's pretty simple. They're fundamental, not only for public health, but for neighborhoods, for healthy neighborhoods to exist. There's been a clear connection between diet and disease, and there were some recent studies that showed, that kind of regardless of income, regardless of race, Detroiters are suffering higher incidences of years lost, years of life lost due to diet-related diseases. So there's a real public health imperative. And then there's a real economic opportunity. Detroiters are spending their dollars outside of the city, and that's an opportunity for reinvestment back into Detroit. And the one kind of retail that everybody needs. Everybody's got to buy food. So there's a lot of reasons why grocery makes sense. This is a map of all of the retail stores that are coded as grocery in a pretty common data set that you can commercially buy. So when you look at it, and that's primarily the city of Detroit, a little bit of it is the suburban area. When you look at it, it looks like all these stores. The small dots are under 10,000 square feet, and as the dots get larger, it's representative of size. If it's a small dot, it's probably a liquor store. But this is almost endemic. It represents what the problem is that there's a lot of retail establishments that are masquerading as grocery stores, but you just have to drive by them to know it's not really a grocery store. And a big part of our challenge is kind of wiping through that clutter and really helping to sustain and develop stores that have the kinds of things you expect. Fresh fruits and vegetables, a meat department, whether or not it's the butcher shop or the prepackaged meats, bakery products, dairy and cheeses, and then grocery. And having all of those kinds of things that you would expect to have to go in and buy to make dinner at home is our definition of a grocery store. So it becomes really hard sometimes when you're doing the market studies and doing some other things. You've got to wipe through that clutter and really get into the neighborhoods to understand what's the real food access dynamic that's going on in the neighborhood. We made an attempt in 2007. We had done a lot of work as an organization around purchasing power and consumer behavior. And so the next 2 maps show different ways of quantifying the opportunity for grocery stores. In this map, it's based on retail leakage. So this is based on purchasing power. And what we did was we looked at stores that were larger than 10,000 square feet that had at least 20 employees. So we figured they're more likely to be a real grocery store than not. And we looked at what the per capita spending was on grocery. And there's some ways you can kind of figure out based on how much retail availability there is and people spending power, whether or not they're spending, their purchasing power is really being met. So the darker the green, it means the more opportunity, really, the darker the green, the more opportunity there is for new grocery stores or expansions of grocery stores. This is kind of the converse. This is based on per capita, on population density. So here it's the lighter the green, the more opportunity. So you can see quite a bit of the city, even the dark green, has some opportunity in it. We convened a task force with industry folks to really try to understand the problem. We worked on this really been working on this for about 2 years and issued a report last year that I'll make available to Close Up if anyone is interested. There's a PDF of it. And are now in our implementation phase. So we were able to secure about $500,000 from the Kresge Foundation to really develop one of the recommendations of the report, which was specifically that we should be focusing on supporting and expanding not only existing grocers, but attracting new grocers to the city. The basic question I think that a lot of people have is, well, why aren't the existing grocers meeting demand, and why aren't new entrants recognizing this demand and entering the market? And it's pretty simple. The new grocers, it only takes one bad shopping experience for you to never go back to a grocery store. And a lot of what we found as we visited dozens and dozens of stores in Detroit is that they're missing that middle class market. They're missing the market. Anybody truly who has a car, who has choices and can travel outside the city is chosen to do that. And it's for a wide variety of reasons. I don't have enough time to get into all of them in this part of the presentation, but for a wide variety of reasons. And it's really hard once you lose that market to get it back. And then for new grocers, they don't recognize the market. When they see what the existing grocers look like, and when they use the publicly available market information that's available about Detroit, the privately available as well. Because it's based on census data, because it's based on past trends, doesn't really capture what the opportunity is in the city. And so, just like in other aspects of retail development, Detroiters' purchasing power and the diversity of the community gets missed by conventional grocers, particularly national chains, that are looking to fit specific formulas. And so there's a lot of reasons, why things are the way they are. And the program that we're trying to develop and implement next year is really tailored to address those specific challenges. So our vision is to increase the quantity of quality grocery stores in the city. And as I mentioned before, this is really about fresh food. This is not about convenience stores plus, but really about, it's kind of like pornography. Grocery store when you see it. And those are the kinds of stores that we're going to be working with. And really, there's a huge opportunity to do something amazing and different in Detroit. We're not the only city in America that has business challenges in this sector, and there's a real opportunity to inspire innovation and to do some interesting community partnerships, and you'll learn a little bit about one of those later on in the panel. Our goal is to impact 22 stores over 3 years in a bunch of different formats. Again, this is not a one-size-fits-all approach because different kinds of neighborhoods need different kinds of stores. So there's a variety of different stores that we'll be looking to work with. There are 3 program components. The first one is the hand-holding component. We'll be working, much like we do with other kinds of businesses, we'll be working hand-in-hand with the grocers as they navigate the process of either opening a new store in Detroit or making improvements and expansions to their existing stores. The second major component, which will really set this program at part is the technical assistance piece. I think a lot of times we assume that business people just know how to run their business. We should just let them go do their thing. And what we're finding in Detroit is that it is a challenging environment. This is a really hard kind of business to run. There's only a 1% margin. There's very little room for error. And sometimes, grocers, particularly independent grocers, need a little bit of help in getting professional experts in to deal with some of their problems, to really create stores that can meet those challenges. So our program will really be heavy on technical assistance because we want to make sure that investments that we make in the stores are going to yield results and are going to be oriented towards improving the quality of the experience for the customer and the quality of the food. And then the last piece, you have to have money to do these things, either working capital to change, the ways stores operate, or the construction capital to build a new store. And so the program will have a financing component as well. That's really going to be the hardest piece of the program to implement because it requires raising money in a very challenging environment. We're going to be able to use the financing for a number of different things, and as we get into the discussion today, we can talk about that. And then the last thing I just wanted to touch on that Larissa had asked that we talk a little bit about were opportunities and challenge. And so there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges with this program. This program is really meant to be a base program that a number of different kinds of food retail operations can plug into, both existing grocers, new grocers, small produce stores. There's a lot of opportunity to build off the program. And so, I think we're trying to start at a realistic place and help build all of those components over time with a variety of partners like those you see here today. There's a couple, I think, interesting components we'll probably talk some more about as we get into the discussion today. But there's a huge desire in the community for better food, and there's also a lot of concern amongst the existing grocer base about their own image and their opportunity to compete, and it's an interesting tension. There's a huge opportunity. The city's going to be doing some major neighborhood and land use planning over the next year, and there's a real opportunity to use grocery stores to anchor residential and neighborhood investments, and we're really trying to position the program to fit into the city's larger land use vision in that way. There are, as you saw on that first slide, a lot of existing grocers, but it's hard to tell someone that they're not running their business as well as they could be. And so our real challenge is going to be picking the handful of grocers that exist in the city now that really are committed to making the right changes, and then also finding those new entrants that are also committed to doing the right thing and just don't see an opportunity to make a lot of money. For us, this is really about neighborhood change. And I think the last point I'll make is that I can't tell you how many phone calls I've received from people who want to open grocery stores. And everybody, this is such a passionate issue, but it really is the hardest kind of retail business you can get into. Your inventory goes bad, so you have to throw it out. You can't keep it around. You make one mistake, your customers don't want to come back, and there's a huge psychology around how people buy their food. I mean, even the lighting. If your store lighting is wrong, or there's how you enter this. I mean, all these different things. It's really, really hard. But there's such passion and energy. I think one of the challenges we're going to have is how do you help harness all this entrepreneurial interest, all this community passion in a way that really we're all working towards the same goal. And I hope that today, as you hear the other presentations, you'll start to see that there is a lot of, I think there's a number of us all trying to walk down the road together and figure out how to harness that passion. So. But Margaret will talk about her program next.
Hi. I have a input source of notes. As Olga speaks, I think, oh, I need to say something about that. I need to say something about that. What if somebody asks me about that? So I've got the computer up. It's really nice to be here. My name is Margaret Gary. I'm Director of Special Projects at the State of Michigan Department of Human Services. And I see a lot of faces in the audience, neighbors, old friends, people I haven't seen in many years, and a lot of folks that I haven't seen. It's really interesting to see the kind of interest, like Olga was speaking about, around food in Detroit. We know, those of us who've been working in Detroit around food access issues, we know that the problem of access to affordable and healthy foods isn't unique to Detroit, and is not unique to inner city neighborhoods either. This actually is a global problem. It happens in developed and developing countries, and the problem it's not about hunger. It's really about chronic disease. Chronic diseases, you probably know, include diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, obesity, and we're experiencing a global epidemic of, this is what the World Health Organization tells us at any rate, of chronic disease. According to the World Health Organization, chronic diseases are responsible for over half of all of the diseases all across the globe. By 2012, that'll be 60%. Historically, we think of these diseases as happening in affluent populations, but more and more they're concentrated, or they're emerging at an alarming rate in the developing world and in the poorest communities in wealthier countries like Detroit. And in the developing world, the pattern is the same as it's been in the developed world. The increase in chronic diseases are related to increased consumption of energy-dense food, high in fats, calories, proteins, low in fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. And the energy-dense diets are becoming more and more prevalent because basically up until now, we've been designing food, we've commoditized food to address issues of hunger. We've been trying to pack in energy, we've been trying to pack in calories, and we've been trying to figure out how to move food so it's not perishable from place to place so that everybody gets enough. And that seemed, that made sense, we had to deal with that. But we've known for years that this kind of, or we've seen in developing or developed countries that this diet has led to chronic diseases, and that's happening now. We see that happening across the globe. So we know in Detroit that part of our solution to the global epidemic of chronic diseases is improving access to affordable, healthy, and fresh food in our neighborhoods. And the Detroit Grocer Project, which is the current name for the program that I'm in the process of designing for the state of Michigan, Department of Human Services, aims to help to improve access to affordable, healthy food by empowering a new community of diverse, enterprising Detroiters to operate grocery stores across the city, and do that by providing the training, experience, and networks they need to succeed. This is being developed as a pilot for the state of Michigan in the city of Detroit, working closely with local stakeholders to look to see if it makes sense to expand to other areas of the state. Southeast Michigan, we started in Detroit because of the, well, first, we're Detroiters. The director of the Department of Human Services, Director Ahmed, is from southeastern Michigan. And so we happen to know that Southeast Michigan benefits from a very strong tradition of independently owned grocery stores. And we also know that on the ground there's a lot of activity. So from deciding to make public policy perspective, there were a lot of infrastructure there that we could build off of. And so we're trying to build on the strong tradition of grocery stores, and realizing that a number of economic and community development goals can be reached by developing such a training program. We basically have three goals that we think we can accomplish: increasing access to affordable and healthy food, strengthening the economic base of Detroit neighborhoods, and creating new jobs and economic opportunity for Detroiters, for folks who may not otherwise have access to jobs and opportunities like these in their neighborhoods. So how did I'll talk a little bit about what it is we're going to do, but I'm going to start by saying a little bit about how it is that we came to decide that what we wanted to do was, create like a pipeline of grocers, basically. How do we decide to do that? Well, in last year, the director of the department, Ismail Ahmed, started looking at developing an approach to reducing poverty across the state. So the Department of Human Services, it's your safety net, right? And what we've traditionally done is provide income support, food supports, other social supports. And what we're working to do is develop statewide policy that actually impacts poverty, reduces the impacts, makes it less difficult to be poor, or reduces, the possibility that you're going to be poor. So we brought together a number of different state agencies to focus on poverty from the perspective, not just providing the supports, but actually impacting poverty. We brought together a whole bunch of people who work in the area of economic development or also social services and started looking at what different ways we can do things. And one of the different ways we can do things is support food access and the development of grocery stores in our areas that don't have that. We know that, you've heard this, in the inner city, groceries cost more money. I mean, the data says that in chain supermarkets in the inner city, the cost of groceries is a little bit higher. The data also says that there's not a lot of chain supermarkets in the inner city, so most of the food you buy comes from a little store, and the economics of that make the cost of groceries that much more. So automatically, you live in the inner city and your dollar doesn't stretch as far. So, it's just another one of those ways that living in an impoverished place or living in poverty is more expensive than not. So, that's sort of the background of what we're doing. But we're also coming from, Director Ahmed, prior to becoming the director of the Department of Human Services, ran this organization called Access, and it is a human and social service organization in Dearborn and in Detroit, that operates in Detroit. And it was originally created to serve immigrants to the United States, mostly from Arab countries. And what Director Ahmed did over time would be, he would be asked to be called into Detroit neighborhoods to mediate conflicts that had begun in grocery stores or in gas stations, usually around economic issues, but had turned into race issues and had become very racially polarized. So, there's a lot of ways to address sort of the race tensions that might arise around economic opportunity and store ownership in urban areas, and people have done a lot of things, and Director Ahmed has done a lot of things. And one of the things that he thought about doing and is in a position to do is to kind of create a program where people from in the city of Detroit have the opportunity to actually have business ownership. So basically, we're doing business acceleration. It's sort of an entrepreneurial development system. And what's the difference between the work that the Growth Corporation does and the Detroit Grocer Project? Well, basically, we're going into sort of a niche of entrepreneurs that the Growth Corporation, it's a little bit more hand-holding. And so it's a little bit longer of a haul. So we're trying to start with folks who may not be ready to move into the Growth Corporation's programs, but really starting to provide entrepreneurial training, industry training, very typical business acceleration or business incubation or entrepreneurial development stuff. That's one of the inputs. We're also working to hook up folks in the program with existing store owners, so there's a network and mentoring opportunity. We're working on access to capital. We have brand new entrepreneurs have a little bit of a different issue than existing entrepreneurs when it comes to accessing capital. It's harder. So we need to be looking at how to create new opportunities and hook them up with those opportunities. And the other thing that the fourth component of the program is really community component of the program, where we know that grocery stores succeed most when they know who their customers are. And in most, it's kind of funny, public policy business, we use different words for the same thing. Public policy, it's like community organizing or community outreach. In the business school, it's focus groups and it's marketing. But, it's sort of the same thing. But there's definitely a community outreach where, and Brad talks about this a little bit, we sort of look at him as a model, where you really engage community to have ownership around the grocery store. We're also, basically what we're doing is we're recognizing that, like Olga said, that there's a fundamental market demand for grocery stores in the city of Detroit, for groceries in the city of Detroit. Olga talked about the leakage. We looked at our food stamp data. It's not food stamps. Supplemental nutrition program data. We don't call it food stamps anymore. For just February of 2009. And we saw that out of a total of $33 million in food assistance benefits that were distributed to Detroit residents, $8 million were not redeemed at stores, were redeemed at stores outside of the city. And that was in 1 month. So if you multiply that by 12, and we're looking at the data for the year, but we're just extrapolating now, that's $100 million. That's a store or two, It's like 8 stores, 8 good-sized stores that we could be supporting. That's just food benefits, supplemental food benefits alone. So we know that there's demand there, and we're trying to get at it, basically this, the way that works by supporting the entrepreneurs, but we're looking at a little bit of a different niche so that, we can get at the big issue from a lot of different directions. I'm out of time. So there were some other items that I wanted to cover or was asked to cover, but I launched into chronic disease and a lecture on that. So if you have questions about the model and the program, we can talk about it after the other folks are done.
So my name is Brad Wilson, and I work with United Food and Commercial Workers. We're a union that, among other things, represents grocery store workers, and I get paid by them. And I represent, as one equal kind of a round table, one organization in this larger thing that's called the Detroit Community Grocery Store Coalition. And the basic idea of what that is and who we are, and there's some folks who are sitting here in the room today, so if I can't answer the questions, I hope they can, and they should jump in to do so. I want to talk a little bit, how did this project come to be? And it's pretty simple. We've heard a lot of the problems. We're literally in a food desert in the city of Detroit. We started talking with a number of folks that we happen to know who work in the grocery store industry. Some of those people were Farmer Jack workers, and as well, most of you know here, Farmer Jack's has left the state in 2007. 67 stores that were in the state, a number of those that were in the city of Detroit, and people were saying we don't have jobs, and we've got problems. You've got spouses who work at the store, and so you've got 2 people who are out of work at the same time. And one of my first jobs coming into the union was to help find those people new jobs, get assistance for them in a number of different locations, help keep the rent paid and the heat on and all that other good stuff. And so in having these discussions, we started talking with more community groups and worked to figure out, so what do we do to solve problems rather than talk about the problems? And one of the things that we keep hearing was we need better fresh food access, we need to improve jobs, we need to improve local communities and their local economies. How do you do that? And so there's these longer discussions, and there's lots of different things that you can do. And one of the things that people talked about was, well, why don't we have a grocery store in the city that we can be proud of and that we can get involved in and improve that fresh food access and take over for some of these stores that were gone. And so we went about and started looking at traditional approaches, went to traditional grocery stores, some of the ones that we've worked with and that we have contracts with, and said, hey, what's it going to take you to get you into the city today? And short story is no thank you. Okay, so the thought process is let's do this ourselves. And started getting a bunch of folks together, community organization, right? Start asking people, do you care about this issue? If so, do you want to get involved? And that's going to be my question for you guys here today. There's a sign-up sheet that might be floating around, or it might be somewhere you can come up and talk to me. But, I don't pretend or profess to wear a super person cape, because none of us run around with those on our backs, and we need people who are here today to get involved to make this a reality. Otherwise, it's just a lot of talk. And talk is great, but we need to have action, and we need to have a place where people can feel proud to work and shop and proud to be part owners in this. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Looking at kind of where we are and why we're here, we have a coalition of community groups, churches, and individuals. And the idea is not really new. Nothing that I should tell you is new here today. It's recycled material from previous times. Really, the model that we're going back to, quite frankly, is something that we did in the 30s, 40s, and maybe even argue the 10s and the 20s. And really kind of looking at that maybe a little bit larger scale. And so we looked at some folks and we were talking with them and getting ideas. And so we just went around and basically stole a bunch of models from other places around the country and around the world and figured out, okay, would this work here? And then we bounce it off some of the folks that are in our coalition. Yes, no, what do we think? Yeah. And so that's really all we've done, really in honesty. We've taken pieces, parts from different places and stuck them together. And it looks new, but it really, when you really break it down, it's not. So basically, what are we looking to do? It's pretty simple. It's kind of a hybrid model. We're looking at having workers own a piece of the grocery store, consumers own a piece of the grocery store, and community groups own a piece of the grocery store. So if the store does well, they do well. It's kind of like holding a piece of stock for IBM, except you get a whole heck of a lot more. So you get to get the dollars, the dividends back. You get to have a say in what we do, the quality, the quantity, and the things that are inside the store, how it runs. And the idea here is to talk with local community gardeners, which we've already started to do, and farmers, and say we'd like to purchase produce from your farms and gardens. Randall's going to be talking in a couple seconds. We've had discussions with the Detroit Eastern Market and say, hey, if we can't get it from the gardens and farms, we want to get it from you guys. If we can't get it from there, we want to get it from folks who farm in the state of Michigan. And idea is getting back to this locality, right? Again, not new stuff, really kind of old stuff, stuff that we've done in the past. Basically, there's two things we're hoping to accomplish in the overall scheme to kind of pull back. We want to improve fresh food access. Yes, I get that. How are we going to do that? Two prongs. One, create a grocery store that's community-based. And my hope is I just explained a little bit about what that is. And I'm moving through this fairly quickly. Of course, there's a lot more that everybody could talk about for hours and hours. So hopefully some of the questions will get the stuff that we missed. And then the other part of that is improving the current standards of grocery stores, right? Because the hope is, among other things, is to raise up the level, right? Rising tides rise all boats. That's kind of the thought process. So you talk about some of the problems, and I'm not really going to get into all this stuff, and you guys can read, and Olga's hit a lot of it, and so has Margaret, so I'm going to roll past of it and kind of move along to get into some of the other things. So you can kind of see some of the other objectives. We started over a year and a half ago to get this project together, and one of the things that we did is we literally started to say, well, who really wants to do something? So we heard you say you're interested. We heard you say that you care about improving fresh food access, so now let's shut up and do some work. And rather than have tons and tons of meetings, we said we're going to do some work groups, and we're actually going to work there rather than talk there. And we said, okay, well, let's first, before we get to that, we have to have some guiding principles. And we came up with these guiding principles. You can all check them out on the web, and I'm not going to throw you out in front of them now because there's too long and they're too numerous. But they're really basic things, right? If you're interested, you can go to Detroit Community Grocery Store Coalition.net. We try to make that as long as possible. So Detroit Community Grocery Store Coalition.net. We hope to have the abbreviations down the road. But we want to get at some of these objectives, right? We want to have partnerships. We need to have local produce. We need to be able to talk with those gardeners. So we've had discussions with people like Grown in Detroit to be able to get as much, which is a collaborative of local gardeners, to be able to get some of their gardens. And our hope is that not only are we going to create good jobs that are from folks who are in the neighborhood, right, around this particular grocery store, who know the neighborhood, who've lived in the neighborhood, who know what people eat, right? This is not your traditional grocery store where what they do in Ann Arbor is what they do in Pontiac, is what they do in Sterling Heights, right? They actually think about, well, who is my customer? We talked about that, right? It's your community outreach. And so we've seen successful models, and I'll give you one. There's a store in Philadelphia, and one of the things that they do is before they open up the store, they do crazy things like talk to people at their door, actually at their house. Where do you go? What do you do? Where do you shop? Those types of things, right? They have a community center inside the building, so the people are welcome to come. They get to use it for free. They find out who the heck they're talking to, who are they selling to, who are their customers, and why are they there. And they basically say to them, okay, what do we need to do? What does it look like? What should this place look like? And so they get crazy feedback like that, right? Rather than just talking to people on the phone. Some of the other things that we're looking at doing is not only having local produce in the stores, but our hope is that we generate a market, right? Because Grown in Detroit has already told us we probably won't be able to give you that much. And then that we go right over to Eastern Market, and hopefully they'll be able to fill the void for the rest, which I'm sure they can do. And then we'll have a regular traditional wholesaler that can back us up even further. But the hope is that you create a market incentive for people to put up to put up community gardens. We have literally 3 plots of land at the store that we're looking at, and we're looking to find community groups to take over those plots of land so that they can put gardens on, so they can sell to the store, so maybe they can make a little bit of money to put in their pocket, and hopefully drive the market on hoop houses too, or your traditional greenhouses. So this is some of the things that we've, again, already talked about. So this is some of our hopes too. We're not just about creating a grocery store to sell groceries, but we have all these other objectives too, right? Health is another issue, and we've talked a little bit about that. So where the heck is this thing going to go? Where's this grocery store going to go that we've talked about? Well, one of the things we did early on was we had a location subcommittee, and that group basically went around and asked a lot of people, hey, where should we put a good grocery store? We took some data from Olga and basically looked at, if you remember the grocery store leakage, that green map, right? We're over on the far right. It's at St. Jean and Jefferson. And if you look there, there's no big, large dots. We want to hopefully be the next big, large dot in that area, and that's literally considered to be a food desert. And some of the studies that were mentioned here already shows that area as being a food desert. We looked at that heavily. We wanted to be in a spot where people don't have that kind of access, and we want to improve that access. And then we had 79 other criteria. Some were very community-based, socially based, some were economically based. And so we took all those into effect from all these ideas from the different parts of the community, kind of threw them into this committee. They picked out 7 of them that they thought were really good. We had a big, large meeting. We debated kind of the pros and cons of those 7, narrowed it down to 2, and then we really dug on them in the local committee. And then we came up with one, and that's over at St. Jean and Jefferson. It's a former Farmer Jack. The address is 11250 East Jefferson, for those that are really interested. And basically the thought process there was that's a store that's in existence. It's a pretty new store. It was shut down in 2007. We can walk right in the door. They literally still have the bags at the end of the registers. We actually had a big community meeting. We had about 250 people show up in the store. And people kept on saying, so does this store open tomorrow? When does that look? Because it's got all the stuff ready to roll. And so the thought process here is we'd like to be able to kind of kick off, right? Get it going as soon as possible. So one of the things too is that you can invest in this store, and we're going to have our market study back on Tuesday, and that'll tell us a couple of things. That is a really large store, 63,000 square feet is at that location. So there's 2 questions we're answering in the market study. One is, can we do 40,000 square feet, which is a little bit smaller, or can we do 63,000 square feet, which is really large? And what will our profit look like? We're looking at something called a low-profit limited liability corporation. So I'll say it again because it's crazy. Low-profit limited liability corporation. Well, what the heck is that? Well, I can't tell you because it's really not something that's been really put together a lot in the state of Michigan. But what I can tell you is you can have the 3 different groups, right? Consumers, workers, and community groups that own a piece. And the hope is that we get into these investors. We're going literally out into the neighborhoods to say, would you like to invest in this grocery store? You want to throw $20 down? Great, we'll take that. If you want to put $100,000 in, we'll take that too. It allows you to be an investor, right? So if the store does well, you do well. And the other part of that too is a little bit of business in there, and it's called shrink rate. Shrink rate means people who steal. And if you have a community group or a group of community folks who are interested in that store, they're less likely to walk away with it if it's theirs, right? Because they know they're taking it out of their pocket. So you reduce shrink rate. We're getting seeing a very effective shrink rate reduction of almost 0.5%, which, you know, Olga's talking about 1% on your money. You get 0.5% off of your shrink rate. That's a nice number. Not to mention, you've got people in the community who are benefiting from this store, and we're not sending the money out to a different state, to a different country. So how can I help? You can see all the different things. I need you in two different ways. One is to come to volunteer for one of our 4 work groups, and you can be on the food justice, you can be on stakeholders, you can be on communication, and you can also be on resource development. And quickly, I'll say food justice is improving current grocery store standards. Resource development is in linking investors with our coalition. Communication is getting the word out, and stakeholders recruiting new people into the coalition. You should have received when you walked in the door this flyer here. This tells you more about how you can get involved in the different work groups, and it tells you a little bit about who we are. You can come to our next meeting, which is on the purple one, and then you'll be happy to know that you should pull your cell phones out and/or your pens. And I actually have the location. I got it just literally on the way over. So we're going to be at the United Way on Tuesday, November 10th, 2009, 6 to 8 p.m. And that's located at 660 Woodward Avenue, 660 Woodward Avenue, Suite 300. And that's in Detroit, and the zip for those who use MapQuest and or Google Maps, 48226. And park at 2 Detroit Garage. Thank you for your time.
In case you didn't get the phone number. Good afternoon. I'm Randall Fogelman. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Eastern Market Corporation and a proud alumni of the Urban Planning Program here at the University of Michigan. Little shout out for the planning program. I'm going to go in a little sort of big picture about what Eastern Market Corporation is, and then I'm going to talk about some of the specific programs that we're actively involved in. Eastern Market Corporation is a nonprofit that was established in 2006 to govern the Eastern Market. So the city retains ownership of the market, but we manage it for them. So much like the Detroit Institute of Arts, or the Detroit Historical Society, or the Detroit Zoological Society are all managed by nonprofits now. The city retains ownership. We're set up the same way. We have a board of directors, 21-member board of directors that consists equally of 7 vendors and merchants from the area, 7 representatives of the city of Detroit. We actually have 2 council members on our board of directors. And 7 members from the greater community, people, stakeholders in the market, some representatives from Michigan State University's agriculture program, and some others in the community that are actively concerned about what goes on in the Eastern Market. Eastern Market has 3 key missions. We're going to serve as the hub of a robust local food system, the heart of a compelling business district, and the keystone to the adjacent viable and sustainable neighborhoods. The market has actually been there since 1891. We are the largest historic market district in the country. It consists of over 14 acres of market core, plus many more acres sort of the greater district. And we have 4 markets actually, sort of within the one market. We're a retail market, which is what most people know us for. Saturday. How many people have been down the Eastern Market on a Saturday afternoon? That's a great showing of support. Thank you. We have the AM market, which most people don't know about. Midnight through 6 a.m. in season, so basically late March through end of November. We have farmers that come down, everything from a pickup truck to 5 or 6 semi-loads that are bringing their produce there. And then the high-end grocery stores, the produce houses, the restaurants are all coming there and purchasing directly from them. The forklifts do their dance and they're out of there before anybody else is even up. And I have a theory that in Michigan, everyone's talking about eating local now. We've been eating local in Michigan for a long time. We just didn't know it. The chances are, if you were eating cantaloupe in June or July in Michigan, it came through the Eastern Market. We do a great business in flower market. We have lots of flowers, lots of plants of flowers. We have an annual flower day every year. And a lot of the farmers actually grow produce and flowers to supplement their incomes. And then we're a special event location. We use the sheds for a lot of different special events. We have a Harvest Beer Festival coming up this Saturday. I urge you to check it out. There's going to be like 200 different beers produced by the Michigan Brewers Guild. Come on down, it's definitely a good time. And we're also the home of Detroit Lions tailgating, the official spot for tailgating. And special events, use of the market for special events is critical to developing a sustainable model for the Eastern market. Because part of our agreement with the city, our management and promotion agreement, is we need to be self-sufficient within 5 years. So we're about 3 years into that. So we see a lot of that income right now through rents and other foundation support. We support about 60% of our operating budget, and the rest comes from special events. So part of the original, there were many different plans that were set up about the Eastern market for basically the past 15, 20 years. I know the planning program here did a plan for it, Project for Public Spaces out in New York, different groups, and every one of them said that the market should have a nonprofit to manage it. And part of that was a reinvestment strategy, and the reinvestment strategy was what we were going to do with these 5 historic sheds. So this is a picture of Shed 2. Before we assumed management. In the late 70s, it received some facelifts with these super graphics that were really important for its time, but kind of outdated. So we had the money, and that was, went forward, and we renovated Shed 2 into this. We spent almost $2 million renovating the building. It was originally built in 1891. Hadn't seen much love since, and it's really now a focal point for the market. We did a couple things with the shed that made it a little different than what it's always been. We have sort of 2 different categories of vendors at the Eastern market. We are a public market, more so than a farmer's market. And the distinguished difference is that we have resellers, people that are there just selling produce. You can buy pineapple, you can buy bananas, that come over from all over the world. And that's how we're able to stay open 52 weeks a year. But in Shed 2, we took another step forward and we added a couple wings of value-added products, some specialty goods, granolas, breads, baked goods, cheese, pickles, barbecue sauces, salad dressings, salsas, even coffee beans. Obviously, the coffee beans aren't coming locally, but they're roasted locally. And it's been a great addition to the market, and it's great for local entrepreneurs, a chance to set up shop, and you're basically, for $55 or $65, you get a stall on a Saturday. You're reaching out to basically 20 to 40,000 visitors that come every Saturday. So the reinvestment strategy was a plan for all the sheds, but after doing the first shed, we kind of took a step back and realized that some of the things, the world had changed. Food was obviously, at the forefront of what's going on and all the different health-related issues that we needed to re-examine kind of what our focus was going to be with these buildings. So we came up with Eastern Market 360, which is obviously a bold strategy to reverse decades of decline and build an important anchor to help transform the historic core of Detroit around food. And we're going to expand the use of the Eastern Market itself, and is one part of addressing the food access issue. Adding more retail days of operation and making the market more compelling in the winter are important objectives of Eastern Market 360. So the first step of Eastern Market 360 was renovating. Let's back up there. Sorry. We are now completing renovations of Shed 3. This building was built in 1922. Had not seen any love since. We've completely renovated the building, and this is a picture of what it's going to look like when it's done. And it's really almost done. I should have taken an actual picture. It'll be done by the end of the month. This is just a rendering of what it's going to look like. But I'm calling it now the Cathedral Produce. This is giant. It's a 30,000 square foot building with these incredible glass, natural light coming into the building. It's really a shining star for the markets. And we're going to, like I said, complete it in November of 2009, and it's really going to be help us add additional days to the market and also be a great space for special events. We've already gotten some calls for people setting up some things for the auto show. They want to host events here. And one of the things we did with this shed is we put radiant heated floors in. So, it's never been a heated shed. It's always been used in the wintertime, but with a lot of space heaters and propane heaters, a pretty cold place to be. So we put radiant heated floors in. We do not have the geothermal system yet to plug into that. We need to raise a little bit more money, but hopefully by next winter we'll be able to heat that. We'll never be a balmy, 70 degrees, but at least it'll take the chill out and make it more accessible throughout the year. So the capstone project of the Eastern Market 360 is Shed 4. It's going to be our market hall and education center. It will enable 4 more days a week of operation and provide an interactive facility to engage the community to improve food literacy. It's a 2-story building, as you can see here, food hall, demonstration kitchen, signature restaurant on the ground level, education center, teaching kitchens on the 2nd level, and we're going to completely integrate it with the existing Eastern Market parking deck. There's actually a 300-car parking deck in the Eastern Market that most people don't know about because it's oftentimes not open, but it's the one last piece that's still managed by the city of Detroit. So as we worked on the feasibility study for this market hall, it's part of, it's basically estimated going to be $20 to $25 million to renovate or to create this building. You looked at how can you do this without competing with some of the existing businesses that are in the market. And what we've realized that our customers come from all over Metro Detroit. We're 50% city, 50% suburbs, and we have what all our consultants that have come in from all over the country have decided we have probably the greatest collection of specialty grocery stores, single to 5-unit grocery stores throughout the country. Hiller's, Papa Joe's, Westbourne, Produce Station, some of the other ones that are around here. And so people actually drive past those stores to come to the Eastern Market on Saturday. And the question is, why do they do that? And my real feeling is they do that because we're an authentic location. But so, some people drive past some of the best locally owned grocery stores in the country, while others have arguably the worst access to fresh food in the country. So the riddle is, how do we build this market hall without, hurting any of the existing businesses and without necessarily competing with the suburban businesses? And our answer is we turn this into a place where there's a lot of food production going on, a lot of food incubators. So instead of having maybe a cheese shop, you have someone in there that's manufacturing cheese, especially artisan stuff, a pasta maker, organic tortilla maker, maybe an ice cream maker. So as we build up to the 4 days of operation that we hope to have, they can work there producing for wholesale, so selling off the back, and also be open on the certain retail days. So part of the other market hall, so we want to complement the expanding food offerings already found in the district, successfully compete with the excellent regional groceries, and like I said, most tenants will have both sort of retail and wholesale operations. And we're looking at that in probably 2 to 3 years to develop this project. And so how do you engage the community and to improve food literacy? And that's something that the education center that'll be on the 2nd floor of this building will help do. We'll do cooking demonstrations. We're going to do actually a demonstration kitchen as well as an incubator kitchen upstairs, nutritional classes. We're going to have community gathering around food. We're going to have spaces that can be used for education classes, but then also going to be turned into banquet spaces where that incubator kitchen could be providing the food for that space. More special events in the market, really reaching out to sort of a diverse group of people. So as we began to develop a clear understanding of how to build a successful market hall, we also began to understand that no matter how much we develop the Eastern Market, many Detroit residents will have a difficult time getting to the market. And that's where sort of that food desert plan that we've been talking about a couple times today comes up. We began to develop programs about taking Eastern Market and taking the food of the Eastern Market to the people. We can't solve the transportation issue. Interesting enough, the city of Detroit just announced some bus cuts, some routes, and one of the routes that they cut, one of 3, was a Russell Street route. So, and that runs right through the market. So we have a couple programs. We have an AM Market Fresh stand where we actually take our produce that we buy at the produce wholesale market directly to different locations. We had an AM Market Fresh kiosk stand where we try to bring some fresh produce into these local corner stores. Didn't go over very well. We're going to sort of revisit that one. And sort of the most important projects that we're working on right now is a Fresh Food Share. It's a partnership between Eastern Market, Gleaners Community Food Bank, and the Greening of Detroit. And once a month, we are gathering produce from our wholesale market, boxing it up, and then distributing it to certain locations on the east side. So maybe a church signs up, and we have 10 boxes that go to them, and then they sell those boxes. It's a $17 box of produce, really about $25 worth of produce. So it's a CSA-style model. And then we've also been involved in the Michigan Neighborhood Food Movers Initiative, and we are going to provide logistical support, refrigerated space for some of these entrepreneurs, and we can talk a little bit more about that in question and answer, some of these entrepreneurs that are taking these trucks directly into the neighborhoods. The success of the farm stand has gone really well. We're actually in discussion with CompuWare. This is a CompuWare location about actually putting a corner store run by Eastern Market in there. So that's been going very well. And one of the other things that, you have to do in terms of, sort of the next step in enabling food entrepreneurism is building a community kitchen. This would be set up in Shed 5, somewhere where people could come if you had a food idea, if you're manufacturing a salsa, a jam, a jelly, you can rent that kitchen and then sell the products right at the Eastern Market. It's also a place where we identified, so some of the stuff that's coming off those trucks, it's not selling so well, maybe it's extra, we can turn that into something value-added products instead of going to the dumpster. So quickly, we have a couple programs that we wanted to help increase demand for food. Good Eating on Gratiot campaign, we're enhancing our website. Market programming, we're doing cooking demonstrations every Saturday at the market now. And we also developed a program in collaboration with the Fair Food Network called MoBucks, where we're actually doubling food stamp benefits up to $10. We're giving these free coupons for a couple more weeks now. Actually, this week is the last week. They expire on the 31st, and these are good for Michigan-grown fruits and vegetables only. So if you come in with your bridge card and you swipe your card and you get $10 off, which we do these tokens, we're going to give you $10 free in these coupons that are good for Michigan-grown fruits and vegetables. So, there's a truck will drive across it. So, one more thing about demand for the food. How do you increase demand? You really have to go after the young people. So we've put together a little program where we're taking children's art and we're going to make it into billboards throughout the city to help increase demand. Getting close to the end, rebuilding local food system is much more than just supporting local growers. We must also support the resurgence of smaller scale processors and distributors to serve smaller scale growers and local populations. And the Eastern Market has these small scale growers. They have these small scale production facilities, all existing in one central location that gives us the greatest opportunity to really change, to become the hub of a Michigan food system. Finally, we are working with the Greening of Detroit to put in a 2.5 acre market garden. They're actually going to be growing produce. We talked about a couple times today, the Growing in Detroit label. We'll be growing produce right in the market. We're going to be integrated market, vertically integrated market. We'll be producing food there and selling it right underneath the sheds. And I think, Detroit, as everyone knows, we once had almost 2 million people. We're probably down to 800,000, 850,000.
No, 900.
900,000. I think we're going to bottom, my guess is we're going to bottom out at 750. Mark my word on that one. We'll come back in a year and see where we go on that. But so we have a lot of opportunity. We have a lot of free vacant land that we can actually grow, and we can actually feed ourselves, like cities like Havana has done. And then finally, because of Detroit's lost its density with a strong cluster of local processors and small scale distributors, we have the opportunity to reestablish a local food system faster than any other large metro area in North America, more uniquely and less reliant on national grocery store chains. So here's some numbers about adding new jobs, business taxes, increased earnings coming out of the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies. One thing I just wanted to point out, I briefly talked about the Michigan Neighborhood Food Movers is a program that's set up. Margaret actually worked very closely on it. If you're interested in seeing a very cool program where you can, for very little money, get a food truck. It's kind of like an ice cream truck. You go to the neighborhoods, you sell your produce. They have bells and everything. You can actually download this from their website, and it's a complete guide on how to do this. Everything from how to sign up to accept the bridge card to the City of Detroit permits and the things that you need to do so. Thank you.
Well, wait till I tell my husband that I think we should invest in a grocery store. Okay, let's have some questions, because I know lots of people have things to say. Yes?
I was wondering, those dots that we've seen on the clip, dots that we had seen on the clip are the stores that were supposedly the targeted areas where there were needed stores. And I was just thinking about how we have the bank system or even the party stores and how they have to survive in the inner city. They have to put up glass and all of those different things to even stay alive. And I've noticed some of the grocery stores that were Plymouth, the Plymouth grocery store, Plymouth in Southfield, the Linden grocery store, several grocery stores that have closed because of crime or just the poverty rate in the city. And then another thing I was thinking about as one of you guys was talking about developing land to do the farming, and I was just thinking to myself, why wouldn't the city, who's had a very hard time of clearing this land, and have we all thought about something like this?
Olga, would you like to start?
Sure. Is the microphone on? No.
Do you want to?
Is it on? You guys can hear me? Okay. We'll do the land thing first because oddly it's easier to answer. There is, I think, a lot of momentum around looking at vacant land and trying to figure out how to create productive uses for that land, whether it's urban farming or well-managed park space or greenways and those kinds of things. And so it's complicated because while there's a lot of vacant land, it doesn't always all touch itself. It's spread out all throughout the city, and I actually think Greening's model. It's better, yeah. Of a network of community gardens that are spread throughout the city really starts to get at that. We have a lot of vacant land, but it's decentralized, and potentially through I think there's lots of different really smart people looking at how you use that land, and the city is becoming really open to addressing the issue and figuring out how to address the issue. I think once it kind of gets past this budget crisis. In terms of the operations issue, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into operating a store, and sometimes, and there's a lot of reasons why stores go out of business, and there's also a lot of reasons why other stores are very successful. And a lot of what I think we're all trying to work on, and particularly the program at the DEGC, is really trying to help grocers look at every component of the business model and figure out how in a challenging urban environment they can be most successful. And that may take new innovations that we haven't thought about. It also sometimes takes investments that might be out of reach for a conventional grocer. A big problem is losing shopping carts. I know it doesn't seem like that big a deal, but when you lose all your shopping carts, that can completely kill what little profit you're going to make that year, because shopping carts are really expensive. Used, they're over $100. Brand new, they're closer to $200. So they're expensive. But in the inner city, if people don't have cars and they're trying to get their groceries home, or if they're scrap metal thieves, grocery carts have a way of walking away. And that's, but there are ways to put wheel locking systems on the carts, and they're just expensive. And those are added operational costs that you might have in an urban setting that you might not have in a suburban setting. What we're trying to do with our program is start to attack those operational differences and think of innovative ways, or look at best practices in other communities that we can import here, or figure out what the new ideas are that are out in the community to start addressing some of those operational challenges. My personal goal is that we should have a network of grocery stores in neighborhoods in Detroit where people are buying their food at grocery stores or not buying their food at liquor stores. Because it's just, you can't offer the same quality food at a liquor store, particularly for produce, stuff that's perishable. You just can't offer the same quality. And honestly, for a liquor store owner, it's hard. It's hard to make that transition to bringing fresh fruits and vegetables into a very small space when it's not your core competency. I think that's been part of the Eastern Market experience and trying to get fresh food into some of the corner stores. So, we're really trying to figure out how do we find, both locations that can be successful, but also the entrepreneurs and/or other chain stores, maybe small regional chains that can be successful, and we're willing to adapt to an urban environment, and provide the kind of quality that Detroiters deserve.
Same question, but two different areas. So on the side, let's say you have a 200-acre cherry orchard or apple orchard in the city of Detroit, is there a movement afoot from any of you to change any kind of tax legislation where if the land was used for agriculture as opposed to living, that something like that is in motion? That's sort of one question. And the same sort of question, though, over on the retail side, is there any kind of movement front that would, help from a tax perspective, give an advantage or an incentive to a retail store owner?
I can answer the grocery store piece. I don't know, Randall, if you know about Durbin Farm.
This is on taxes, whether or not there is anything, is there a movement of front to maybe have different land use taxes? So if you had a significant, not sort of a community urban farm, but an orchard that took up 100 acres in the city, would there be some advantage to that? And on the retail side, same thing, any kind of tax incentives that exist?
So on the retail side, last year there was an amendment passed to the Commercial Rehabilitation Act, which is a property tax abatement that's available for existing commercial property in the state. And for grocers in underserved areas, they can take advantage of this property tax abatement. Basically, what it does is you don't pay taxes on the improvements you make to a grocery store in an underserved area. And it's, how that gets implemented is a little complicated, but there's been a real move on the retail side to start providing those kinds of tax incentives. And then I think the other thing people don't often think about is workforce development incentives. And we've been talking with the City of Detroit's Workforce Development Department about worker training dollars that can really go to help train workers within grocery stores and help move them up, the management management scheme. And that's another incentive that ultimately helps a grocer's bottom line. I don't know, Randall, if you know anything about.
I think you have to, before even the tax issue can come up, they need to back up. Right now, farming cannot be a primary use according to the City of Detroit zoning ordinance. So that farm that we've been talking about, the 2.5 acres in the Eastern Market, they kind of had to turn the other way, and so maybe we've begun to turn the corner on that and getting that started. The other piece is how do you find 100 continuous acres in the City of Detroit? You've got lots of empty lots all over the city. But if even finding 2.5 acres that was continuous is definitely a challenge. But there is recently adopted by the City Council a Food Policy Council, a Detroit Food Policy Council that'll be working forward with moving forward with recommendations that hopefully at some point will get voted on, and some of these policy changes can change. There's a lot of one of the great things I personally about Detroit is it's a little gorilla. You can do things that you might not get away with elsewhere. For example, chickens are illegal to have chickens in the City of Detroit. I happen to know a couple people, I'm not giving you their addresses, that have chickens in their backyard. So, you can do things sort of under the radar.
Great, there's a question at the back.
My first question was, where is the food coming from? I was involved in a similar community-based grocery store program in Nashville, Tennessee last year, and practically every farmer that was spoken to, as soon as the word nonprofit came up, they said, well, that's nice, but how are you going to pay us? And so part of my question is, where's the food coming from then? What incentives are there for the growers to be putting their food into this kind of a program? And then how do you translate that into keeping the prices low enough to make this viable for the residents of Detroit?
Well, I think the simple answer is when you've got, I'll say it this way, this is not a nonprofit, just to be clear, low profit. And the simple answer is that you're going to run it like a traditional business in the sense that you have to look at how you're going to make money at the end of the day. Is that the number one priority? No. Part of the thing that I didn't mention before is we'll be holding back part of the profits, and we've seen this in a particular corporation in Spain where they hold back part of the profits. The shareholders know this, and then you're able to recapitalize for other stores. But back to your question, is really working with them, having those relationships with people, and really to answer your question of how you keep it low enough. I think you're going to be looking at ways in which we've got an operator that we're working with now who is born, raised in the city of Detroit, currently owns a grocery store in the city of Detroit, understands where we need to be with profits, and also understands the social side of what we're working to do. And we're going to have to work a balancing act. That's not a good answer, but that's the answer that I can tell you right now.
I have a good answer.
All right, Margaret.
I think that, I'm just going to say Randall's going to do that. But that's where the asset of Eastern Market comes in, because what we're looking at is we have this opportunity to have a distributor logistics center to kind of negotiate those prices, negotiate those agreements. So it's not a store owner necessarily looking for a farmer. It's a whole new supplier network. So that's really what Eastern Market is. We're finding out the actual how, how do you actually have that be affordable? How do you actually get it so, because transportation costs are lower because it's made right around the corner? How does it actually translate into lower costs for, folks who live in the neighborhood? We're working that out, but we're starting to put together the infrastructure that could, or that can, and that will accomplish that.
And I think I want to add on to that. If you actually buy from the source, if you come down to the Eastern Market, so we have over 100 different wholesale farmers there, and you're buying from the source, you're going to be paying the same thing that the high-end grocery stores are paying as well. It's, this low-cost food, it's pretty inexpensive, and they don't, discriminate if you want to buy one box or a couple pallets. Money is money, they're glad to take it, so.
Let's have one more question, yes.
Yeah, how do you become a grower?
A grower.
If you're a grower, who do you get in touch with to find out about being a grower for vegetables and that?
Are you looking for a grower or actually to be a seller at the Eastern Market?
I grow vegetables.
Okay.
I wanted to spend some in a way that would help people. And how do you find out about that? Who do you get in touch with?
Well, first, are you in the city of Detroit?
No, I live out this way.
Okay. Well, there's a couple options. One, you could always come down to the Eastern Market. It's relatively inexpensive to get started. A stall for wholesale operations is $55.
I don't want to sell. I just want to drop it off and somebody hands it and then they pay me whatever's left. Is that a possibility?
Growing in Detroit. Oh, that's right. He's not out of Detroit.
You stumped us.
And bring, sell it all at once.
Well, that's one thing. There are produce houses in the Eastern Market. There's produce houses throughout the entire city. But one of the things, the next position that Eastern Market Corporation will be adding is a market expediter, someone whose job is to actually work that AM market, to buy produce from farmers, to buy produce from different produce houses, repackage it, and so if a community group or a produce truck in the neighborhood only wants one box, they're going to buy a pallet, but they're going to be able to sell those boxes to different people.
Who would you get in touch with?
I'll give you my card.
Well, I hate to cut this off. I'm sure that they'll take some more questions if you just must know and talk now. But please, let's thank our guests for coming and sharing their knowledge.